Nick Mason, what did Chuck Berry mean to you?
Well, he meant a great deal. He's one of the great icons of rock and roll. And to explain that, you should just think about the fact that virtually every guitar player in the United Kingdom can play at least 3 Chuck Berry numbers. It doesn't matter whether it's the Beatles, the Stones, Radiohead, whatever. His music has been an influence on all of us for the last 50 years.
He's often described as the nearest thing to a godfather of rock and roll or an inventor of rock and roll. Could you explain why?
Well, I think it's just this ability to convert what was this sort of American R&B thing into what became real rock and roll. And I think there's Chuck Berry, someone like maybe Fats Domino, Jerry Lee Lewis. They still stand for something in this day and age. And if you compare it to someone like Bill Haley is so much just about the 50s, but Chuck Berry is relevant today.
You can hear Chuck Berry obviously in so many records, and he's been covered by so many people, whether it's the Beatles or the Stones, or he's been lifted almost directly by the Beach Boys. Is there a sort of a Pink Floyd track that you would say you can hear Chuck Berry in?
Nothing springs to mind, I have to say. I think we were almost lucky that we avoided that whole era. Chuck was famous for coming to England and working with almost any band he could find. He was critical, but he was also very interested in playing music as cheaply as possible. So there are, again, hundreds of English musicians who've been part of Chuck Berry's backing band at some time or another.
I mean, even Bruce Springsteen backed him at one point, didn't he? I mean, do you think he ever got the recognition within the industry that he deserved?
Yes, I think so. I think the fact that everyone knows who he is, he was, and also the fact that he's a writer as well as a performer counts for so much. That's such an important part of the music industry.
What some people have said is that here was a black man who was inventing rock and roll, whose music was then taken on by so many white musicians who became huge stars off the back of it, and it became a sort of a much more of a white music. Do you agree with that sort of analysis, and why do you think it happened?
Not really. I mean, I think that was more. I see that more as I say, going back to the older blues musicians who absolutely were unrecognized, never got the credit for what they'd written, and perhaps had more of were more poorly dealt with than someone like Chuck Berry. I think what's quite nice really is that I think he was a major part of the whole rock and roll invention, and I personally think he was recognized for that role that he played.
And is he the sort of the last of his kind? Is there anybody else still from that generation still around who has the same kind of influence that he had?
The answer is I've no idea. I haven't checked the obituary columns recently. But as I say, I think there's still, they're certainly dwindling, but Chuck, Jerry Lee Lewis, as I said, Fats Domino, and there are still a whole, the music will be around for a long time to come. They've set standards, standard songs that just become part of everyone's repertoire.
Given his riffs are so copyable, whether his playing style was sort of very technically brilliant or different, or was it just sort of innovation in that he made memorable tunes?
Well, I think one thing to remind people about is that memorable tunes, very distinctive guitar sound, but also lyrics. He was someone who wrote some of the most entertaining lyrics in what tend to be rather average love songs all too often, Chuck Berry actually wrote about cars and drive-ins and, I mean, a much broader range of songwriting than perhaps he is given credit for.